The house had always been their safe haven. Now it felt like a hollow shell, filled with nothing but silence and the ghosts of old memories. Sarah and James stood in the dimly lit bedroom, their mother's scent still lingering in the air, a mix of lavender and vanilla, the same fragrance she had worn every day. The funeral had been earlier that morning, a painful blur of condolences, whispered sympathies, and the heavy weight of loss pressing down on their shoulders. Their mother, Margaret Collins, had been everything to them, a single mother who had sacrificed everything to give them the best life she could. Now she was gone. Sarah sighed, running her fingers over the wooden dresser, its surface scratched and worn from years of use. Her gaze drifted downward, and that was when she saw it. A small drawer, slightly ajar, as if it had been left that way on purpose. "James," she whispered, her voice tight with emotion, "look at this." James stepped forward, frowning as she pulled the drawer open. Inside, stacked neatly in a bundle tied with a faded blue ribbon, were several envelopes. The paper was aged, yellowed at the edges, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Their mother's handwriting. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the first envelope. Written across the front in elegant cursive were the words, "For Sarah, when she feels lost." James reached for another, his throat tightening as he read his own name. "For James, when he doesn't believe in himself." There were more. Dozens of letters, each addressed to them for different moments in their lives. Some were for specific milestones, for Sarah on her wedding day, while others were for moments of pain and doubt. For James, when he feels like giving up. Sarah's breath hitched. Tears burned in her eyes as she turned to James, whose expression was unreadable, his fingers gripping the envelope as if it were the last piece of their mother he had left. "She knew," he murmured. "She knew we'd need her, even after she was gone." Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat and slowly opened the first letter. The words inside were simple, but they carried the weight of a mother's love. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you feel lost. And my sweet girl, I know that feeling all too well. But let me remind you of something. You are stronger than you think. You always have been." Sarah's tears finally spilled over, her vision blurring as she clutched the letter to her chest. Even in death, their mother was still guiding them. Even in death, she was still their light. Sarah wiped her tears, but they kept falling, her heart aching in ways she hadn't prepared for. She had lost her mother, but somehow through these letters she hadn't lost her entirely. James sat beside her on the floor, his back leaning against the dresser. He was gripping his own letter, but hadn't opened it yet. Instead, he stared at the envelope, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white. "You should read it," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. James shook his head. "Not yet." The weight of grief pressed down on both of them, thick and suffocating. Their mother had been everything, strong, kind, and wise. She had raised them alone, sacrificing her own happiness to ensure theirs. And now, even in her absence, she had found a way to be here. Sarah unfolded her letter again, rereading the words she had barely absorbed the first time. "You are stronger than you think. You always have been. There will be days when the world feels too heavy, when you feel like you're standing in the middle of a storm with no shelter. But I need you to remember something. You have never been alone, and you never will be. Even if I'm gone, I am with you. In every decision you make, in every choice that feels impossible, I am here. You only have to listen." A quiet sob escaped her lips. She pressed the letter to her chest, closing her eyes. James exhaled deeply, finally tearing open his own envelope. Sarah watched as his eyes moved across the page, his brows furrowing, his lips parting slightly. His fingers trembled as he gripped the edges. "James, my beautiful boy, you doubt yourself too much. You always have. I wish I could be there to remind you every day of how capable you are, how much strength you have inside you. But since I cannot, let this letter be your proof. You are more than your mistakes, more than your fears, and no matter what, I am proud of you." James exhaled sharply, shaking his head as if to fight back his emotions, but it was no use. His shoulders shook, and Sarah reached for his hand. "I can hear her saying it," he whispered, "like she's still here." "She is," Sarah said softly. "She made sure of that." They sat there in silence, surrounded by memories and the quiet presence of their mother's words. The house wasn't empty after all. It was filled with her love, tucked away in each letter, waiting for the moments they would need her most. And at that moment, they knew they would never truly be without her. The afternoon light dimmed as the sky turned a somber shade of gray. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the trees, their branches swaying like silent mourners. Inside the house, Sarah and James remained on the floor, the stack of letters between them, their mother's words lingering in the air like a whisper. James exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. How did she even think to do this? Sarah wiped her damp cheeks, looking at the pile of letters as though they held all the answers. She must have known how hard it would be for us after she was gone. James shook his head. I never even thought about life without her. She was always just there. His voice cracked slightly, and he quickly cleared his throat, trying to mask the emotion clawing its way out. Sarah understood. Their mother had been there, constant. Through scraped knees, broken hearts, and bad decisions. No matter how lost they felt, she had always been there to guide them. And now, even in death, she had left them a path to follow. Sarah hesitated before reaching for another letter. This one was different. The handwriting was still their mother's, but it wasn't addressed to either of them specifically. Instead, it simply read, "For when you don't know how to move forward." She held it up, showing James. His brows furrowed, and without a word, he reached out and carefully unfolded the letter. Together, they began to read. My loves, if you're reading this, then I know the pain you must be feeling. I wish I could take it away, but grief is the price we pay for love. And my darlings, I know how deeply you loved me. But life does not end with loss. It may feel that way now, but you must keep going. You must keep living. I want you to laugh again, to fill this house with stories and warmth. I want you to chase your dreams, to make mistakes, to fall in love, to be brave, even when it feels impossible. Don't let my absence stop you from living, because if you stop moving forward, then I will truly be gone, and I am not ready for that. So promise me, keep going. Not because I would want you to, but because you deserve to. Life is waiting for you, my loves. Step forward. The last words hit like a wave, crashing over them with a force neither had expected. Sarah pressed her lips together, trying to swallow the lump forming in her throat. James exhaled shakily. She always knew what to say. Sarah nodded, clutching the letter like a lifeline. Even now, for the first time since their mother's passing, the weight in their chests felt just a little lighter. Maybe they weren't ready to move forward just yet. But one day, they would be. And when that day came, their mother's words would be right there, guiding them every step of the way. The days that followed were slow, heavy with grief, yet softened by the presence of their mother's words. Every night, Sarah and James sat together, reading a new letter, allowing her voice to fill the quiet spaces of the house. Some letters made them laugh, memories of childhood mischief and motherly scoldings. Others made them cry, reminders of the sacrifices she had made, the struggles she had faced alone, just to give them a better life. Each letter was a thread, weaving her back into their lives, reminding them that even in death, love does not fade. One evening, as Sarah sat on the front porch, a cup of tea warming her hands, James joined her, holding the last unopened letter. For the day you're ready to let go. They exchanged a glance, both hesitant. Letting go felt impossible, like a betrayal of the love they still carried. But as James carefully unfolded the letter, they knew it was time. My darlings, if you're reading this, then you've carried my memory with you through the hardest days. You have allowed yourselves to grieve, to hurt, to miss me. But now, it's time to live. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean you stop loving me. It means you carry me forward, not as a weight of sadness, but as a light guiding you. I want you to be happy. I want you to chase joy the way I chase the love of being your mother. So take a breath, my loves, and take a step forward. I'll be with you, always, Mom. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. There was something else. Peace. James exhaled, a slow, steady breath. He folded the letter gently, placing it back with the others. We should go somewhere, he said after a long silence. Do something new. Sarah smiled through her tears. Yeah, I think Mom would want that. As they sat there, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and gold, they felt it. The quiet presence of their mother. Not in the letters, not in the house, but in their hearts. She was never truly gone. And as they stood up, ready to take their first steps forward, they realized this was not an ending. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one they would carry her love into forever. The end.